Okay, taking a look at the quadratic equation today. Now, so let's say that we take a look here and we're trying to solve for x and we don't know how to factor it, or if we do factor it, it doesn't break down pretty. What can we do? Well, the quadratic equation will always solve every single one of these where you have a trinomial equaling 0. It'll solve everything. It works every single time. There's no sense in even doing factoring if you don't want to. You can always use the quadratic formula or quadratic equation to solve it. Always. But why not use it every time? Because it takes a little bit. And if I can factor something quickly, that's just a little bit easier for me. Let's look what the quadratic equation is. Now, it comes from the 1600s. It's been around a while, but René Descartes, or however you want to say his name, there's all types of pronunciations. He was the first to publish it in a book in I think it's the 1600s. He published it, so he gets credit. It's the way we see it today. And that equation, okay, says that x, the value for x will always be the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of the b value squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. Now, you'll hear me do a little song if you're in class, and I'll put some up on the website that you can watch different ones. But that's a form that you've got to know, okay, that opposite of b. Okay, once we put equals x, it's now an equation, so the quadratic equation. So who the heck are a, b, and c? I don't know who those are. Well, those are the pieces out front. Whatever's in front of x squared is your a value. Whoever's in front of the x is your b. And then here's your c. And here's how we do this. I always have you write out what A, B, and C are. So we're going to write out A, B, and C. A is 1 because it's understood there's a 1 right there. B is the value in front of X, which is 5, and C is 4. Now, I always have you go ahead and do this 4AC piece. Okay, I go ahead and I have you calculate 4 times A times C. 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 4, gives me 16. So let's see what we get here. If we fill in our values now, the opposite of b, b is 5, so I'll get negative 5 plus or minus because we're going to add this thing and then we're going to subtract because there's 2 solutions here. B squared, 5 squared, I'll go ahead and say, okay, it's 25 minus, I've already calculated 4AC right here, 16. So I put 16. That's why I have you do it to the side. 2a, 2 times 1, 2. So x is going to be a negative 5 plus or minus square root of 25 minus 16. That's 9, isn't it? Yes, square root of 9. How beautiful. Which square root of 9 is what? 3. So I'll just put a 3 there over 2. Now, this is as simple as we can get it. So now we go ahead and break up this plus minus. We go ahead and we'll add the 3 and divide by 2, and then we'll subtract the 3 and divide by 2. So now is when we go ahead and split it into negative 5 plus the 3 divided by 2 and negative 5 minus the 3 divided by 2. Okay, so we break it down. Oops, scrolled our screen a little far. So x is equal to that or x is equal to that. Well, negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2 divided by negative 1. There's one of the values that'll work. The other value, negative 8 divided by 2, negative 4. Those are our 2 solutions to the equation. It worked. Now, if we had factored it, we would have seen those were our solutions because that guy up there does factor, but not every one of them will. Look at this guy. Okay, you could maybe factor, but you might not be able to. But if you do, it's going to take a while. So here I'd be like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and use the quadratic equation. A is 40, B is 31, C is 6, and 4 times A times C. 4 times 40 is what? 160 times 6, I think that's 960. Okay, so it's 960. So let's do it. X equals opposite of B plus or minus square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2 times A. All I got to do is plug in correctly and I'm solid. I got the answer. It'll tell me every single time. So opposite of B, opposite of 31 plus or minus square root b squared. 31 times 31. That's 961. Minus, we already did 4a. Oh, look how pretty. 2 times 8, 80. Yeah, that's a little large. That's okay. Negative 31 plus or minus. That's the square root of 1. Now, they're not going to always come out pretty. It might come out square root of 20, and then you're just going to have to go ahead and use the calculator and get your answer. That's okay. This one, it did come out beautiful. So I get plus or minus square root of 1, which is 1, all over 80. So now scroll down a little bit. So we've gotten it this far. So now we need to add the 1 and subtract the 1. We need to break it into the two possibilities. So x is negative 31 plus 1 over 80. Or the other option is maybe it's negative 31 take away 1 over 80. Negative 31, that's negative 30. That's negative 3/8. Because that's negative 30 over 80. Take the zeros off, negative 3/8. Calculator would be negative 0.375. Over here, this is negative 32 over 80. Both can be divided by 8. Right? Divided by 8. Negative 4/10 or negative 0.4 or negative 2/5 if you want it as a fraction. Or as I said, the decimals, negative 0.4. Those options, if you plug either one of those into the equation above, it will come out to be 0. You solved it using the quadratic equation. Even though the numbers were huge, we were able to solve it. No problem. Well, let's say we have this, because we do need to look at one last situation. So, A is 1, B is 5, C is 10. So 4AC. 4 times 1 times 10 is 40. So the solutions will be the opposite of B, plus or minus square root, B squared minus 4AC, all over 2A. Opposite of B, opposite of 5, plus or minus square root, B squared, 5 squared, 25, minus 40, all over 2 times 1, 2. Negative 5 plus or minus square root of negative 15 over 2. Problem here, you cannot take the square root of a negative number. You'll get imaginary numbers, and we just want real number solutions here. We want solutions of 2.7 and negative 8 and 0 and 1 and 5. Okay? We don't want imaginary solutions. So here, when you and I are doing this, we'll simply say, hey, there's no solution. No solution exists. If you get a negative underneath that square root, you can't continue the problem, not in real numbers. That means there's no x that you could plug in here that will ever make that equation true. It never happens. Now, later on, we'll take a look at what that literally means with the graph, but right now, we're not worried about it. We're just going to say, hey, there's no solution here. There's no x that's going to work. All right, there we have the quadratic equation for you.